Magandang umaga, Filipinos. Good morning from Canada. I'm Thomas I. Likeness, reporting from our Eagle News studio in the Western Canadian province of Alberta. My city is Edmonton, and I'm bringing you news from across the country. Well, we've finished another week Friday morning. What are the plans for the weekend? Why don't you do something like this? Have a look at what these folks are doing. It's Loida Cruz and her family. You know, they're doing what the whole family can do is watch a movie, watch it at home. My recommendation, of course, if you haven't seen it yet, is to watch Guerrero Das. It's up on YouTube right now, and what a great movie. Well, it's time for that second cup of coffee. And while you enjoy that, I'll let you know what's going on in Canada today. First, the weather. Today's street scene comes from Slave Lake, Alberta. Slave Lake's a community about 2 hours north of Edmonton. It's beautiful country up there in Slave Lake. This video courtesy of Marvi Abalera. Looking at the weather map today, most of the country has a mix of sun and clouds, the exception being Quebec, where it is sunny. Starting on the west coast, temperature-wise, Vancouver reporting 14 degrees. In Alberta, temperatures in the mid-teens. Same picture in Saskatchewan, mid-teens. We get to Winnipeg, where the high today reached 17 degrees. I think that was a hot spot. Still kind of chilly in Toronto, only 6 degrees there. Also, 6 degrees in Ottawa, the nation's capital. Montreal reporting lots of sun at 6. The Atlantic provinces in that 5 to 6 degree range, with the exception of Newfoundland. It's cooler in St. John's at only 2 degrees. Looking at the news of the day, our top story comes from the province of Saskatchewan, where the government will begin restarting the economy. That's going to take place in about 10 days when the first phase of a 5-phase strategy begins to reopen the province. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says over the next several weeks, restrictions will be lifted. It'll begin on May 4th. That's when dentists and medical practitioners, such as chiropractors, doctors, physiotherapists, they'll all be allowed to reopen their clinics. Practitioners, though, will have to wear gloves and face masks while treating patients, unless, of course, they can distance themselves. Also that day, fishing and recreational boating will be allowed to resume. Now, about 10 days later, golf courses will be reopened. That'll happen on May 15th. But golf carts, you can only have one person on board there. Overnight camping will be permitted on June 1st, but it will be restricted to Saskatchewan residents only. Premier Moe simply doesn't want anybody coming into the province because some of those little critters, that virus, just might be hitching a ride along. Now, Phase 2 begins on May 19th. That's when retail services such as clothing and shoe stores, flower shops, electronic stores, all those non-essential places that had to close down in terms of retail, they will be allowed to reopen. But those establishments will have to limit the number of customers in their stores. As well, they'll have to ensure distancing. Also reopening hair salons, massage practitioners, and acupuncturists. They can resume business, and again, they'll have to have the face masks and gloves. Now, the other 3 phases, there's no target date for when those will come into place, and that would involve such things as, venues for larger gatherings, restaurants, that sort of thing. Those dates will be announced in the future. Now, Moe says some people might think his government is acting too soon. What does he think?
Has confidence that Saskatchewan business can reopen and keep their customers and their employees safe by maintaining similar practices across the sector. That said, we will carefully monitor the case numbers each and every day, and we will adjust our plan accordingly if required.
Moe was asked whether school will resume this fall.
Again, will be determined by how the next number of months go with respect to our battle against COVID-19, because it's not expected that we would have a vaccination, obviously, by this early fall when schools resume. So that will yet be a decision to be made. That being said, our youth are not a high-risk group, if you will, of having severe effects of COVID-19, but maybe a higher risk group of transmission of the disease.
Now, Saskatchewan has a very low number of cases of COVID-19, only 326. There were only 4 deaths from the infection in the province, so that's why they're pretty confident about being able to reopen. Canada has nearly 41,000 cases, 83% of them in Ontario and Quebec. Just over 2,000 deaths have been reported. In my province, Premier Jason Kenney says he'll announce Alberta's relaunch plan next week, but it doesn't sound like he's in a big hurry to remove a lot of restrictions.
And I hope to have an update for the public next week on more details of Alberta's relaunch strategy. I know that people are getting increasingly impatient, but for us simply to imagine that if we were to reopen everything today and the numbers would stay where they are now has absolutely no basis in the science of epidemiology or the experience of this particular virus. As I said 2 weeks ago to Albertans, if we let the virus loose, we would lose the value of all of the sacrifices that we have made to date, and we would simply have to shut down even more of our economy more harshly and probably for a longer period of time, causing even more damage.
Now, Alberta has just over 3,400 cases. There have been 66 deaths from COVID-19 in the province. On the national scene, saying he wants to see long-term solutions to the pandemic, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government will spend more than $1 billion on research to develop a vaccine and treatments for COVID-19.
We need medium-term and long-term solutions. On that front, I can announce today that we're taking another step forward. We're putting in place an additional $1.1 billion for a national medical and research strategy to address COVID-19. This plan has 3 pillars: research on vaccines and other treatments, supports for clinical trials, and expanding national testing and modeling.
He says the money that's been announced today is in addition to previously announced funding for science. And Trudeau also expressed his disgust today at the conditions in nursing homes across Canada.
Right now, we're seeing terrible tragedies in long-term care facilities across the country. This is unacceptable. If you're angry, frustrated, scared, you're right to feel this way. We can do better. We need to do better. Because we are failing our parents, our grandparents, our elders, the greatest generation who built this country. We need to care for them properly. Canadians need to pull together. There have been requests for military assistance by both Ontario and Quebec, which of course we will be answering. Our women and men in uniform will step up with the valor and courage they have always shown. In the short term, we will be there with support so that provinces can get control of this situation. But this is not a long-term solution. In Canada, we shouldn't have soldiers taking care of seniors. Going forward, in the weeks and months to come, we will all have to ask tough questions about how it came to this. We will all have to do more to get through this terrible situation.
While he was long on rhetoric, Trudeau offered no solutions at the daily briefing. He told one reporter that the pandemic has brought the poor conditions in long-term care to the forefront. We've told you about several meat processing plants in the country that have closed due to COVID-19 outbreaks. And you're familiar with the one we've been talking about in High River, Alberta, where more than 400 workers are infected. Of course, more than half the workers at that plant are Filipino, and the Philippine community in High River is rightfully upset about that and concerned. With all of these plants closed, though, Trudeau was asked whether Canada's food supply is secure and whether working conditions in the plant that remains open are safe enough for federal meat inspectors.
We are, of course, very alert to the issue of food supply in Canada. Food security for Canadians is a continued essential priority. We will work with the agricultural industry. We are strengthening processes around the CFIB to ensure both protection for our inspectors and effectiveness in assuring the safety of our food supply and of the conditions in which workers find themselves. We will continue to work with provinces and various jurisdictions to ensure that we are making sure that Canadians get the food that they need.
We'll keep you updated, too, on that situation in High River. Well, is there any sports in the news these days? I mean, nobody's playing anything. Couple of things. For the first time in 97 years, the Calgary Stampede has been canceled. The announcement was made this afternoon that it would just not be safe to hold the event, which is billed as the greatest outdoor show on earth. The event features a world-class rodeo, chuck wagon races, and a midway, as well as all kinds of events throughout the city. Sad to see it put on hold for a year, but a very necessary thing to do. And there's rumblings that hockey may be coming back. That'll keep Canadian fans happy. The games would be played in empty arenas, no fans, just television crews to make sure they can broadcast the games. Now, this comes from ESPN, a sports network, which says the league is looking at NHL arenas. Some of those arenas include the one in Edmonton. Premier Jason Kenney was asked what he thought about this.
Well, I can say that I did receive a call from NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, who wanted to ask some questions about Alberta's status in combating COVID, and there was a very general conversation. We have not received a formal proposal of any kind. I underscored that if a proposal were forthcoming, we would obviously expect the league to prepare a very detailed plan to mitigate risk. And so I can't really comment further. I would just say that obviously as we get into the summer, we hope to be able to see somewhat more activity in as part of our relaunch. It's pretty clear to me that if something like that were to happen, we would not have large crowds gathering in arenas. But I gather the NHL is looking at finishing the season in arenas for television purposes, but without large crowds. Whether or not we could accommodate that, we do not yet know. We have not yet received a formal request, and obviously we would turn to the Chief Medical Officer for her advice.
So we'll wait and see how this plays out. But I've got to get out of here now. But before I go, I want to show you this family, how they're spending the evening, and a good way to spend the weekend. It's the Garospi family from Calgary. They know good movies. And, of course, they're watching the one that I'm always talking about from EBC Films. Of course, it's Guerrero Das. I've been raving about it all weekend. So check it out on YouTube. I guess we don't have the video of that. Anyway, while you're watching it, at least you'll be able to put aside the cares and worries of the day. There they are. There they are. Just a great film. And I love the old guy in the film. He's cranky like I get sometimes. And I can relate to him real well, and had the pleasure of being able to talk with him during the can't even say it, the premiere there. Anyway, do take that movie in. And coming up Monday, an expanded version of our program. They're getting me some help. I'll be joined by other correspondents from across Canada, so I'm really looking forward to hearing their stories as they keep you up to date with what's happening here. So enjoy your weekend. I wish you all good health. Take care of others. Take care of yourselves. Stay home, stay safe, and stay tuned to Eagle News for accurate and balanced coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
This program is presented by
SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
co-presented by Canrib